In the year 68 AD, the Roman Empire was plagued by many rebellions against the Emperor Nero, which quickly ran out of control. Most of his supporters abandoned him and he ended his life at the age of 30. He left no heir, and the rebellions against the emperor soon extended into a civil war for the throne. The following year of conflict has been marked as the year of 4 emperors. These were Galba, who was supported by the Senate, Otho, supported by Praetorian Guard, Vitellius, and Vespasian, supported by different legions. Not all of them entered the race for the throne from the start. At first, Galba enjoyed most support, but he quickly gained enemies due to his harsh rule, injustice, and 2 influential advisors. At the age of 72, he also had no clear heir. The legions stationed around the river Rhine disliked Galba's ascension from the start, and put forward their own candidate for the throne, Vitellius. His legions soon marched towards Rome, where the Praetorian Guard also lost faith in Galba, executed him, and put on the throne their own candidate, Otho. He offered Vitellius a compromise of co-rulership, but Vitellius declined. After a few successful battles for Otho, Vitellius came on top in the decisive battle of Bedriacum, after which Otho ended his life. Vespasian was the last to enter the race for the throne. After officially supporting first Galba and then Otho, he refused to acknowledge Vitellius. Vespasian gathered support in the eastern provinces, and his armies began the long march on Rome, which was slowed by the invading Dacians. The situation increased the importance of the provinces, or more accurately, the legions stationed in the provinces of Pannonia, Moesia, and the rest of the former Illyricum. They declared their support for Vespasian, but as the bulk of his army was still stuck far away from Italy, they had to decide their next steps on their own. Ancient historian Tacitus describes the meeting of soldiers, military officers, and other dignitaries. They had come together at Poetovio, where they discussed whether they should guard the passes that led into Pannonia until the whole mass of the forces could be raised behind them, or whether it would not be a bolder stroke to engage the enemy at once and struggle with him for the possession of Italy. It was the commander of the 7th Legion, Marcus Antonius Primus, who with flashing eyes and fierce tones addressed the gathering, saying that the opposing side has become lazy and unprepared, but if they are given time, they will recover their strength by preparing for war. He listed the risks of delaying the attack and the pros of going on the offensive, while also praising the performance of the soldiers, finishing his speech with the words, "Unless someone restrains me, I, who advise, will also act. Do you, whose fortune is still unblemished, hold back your legions if you will. For me, light cohorts will be enough. Presently you shall hear that the gates of Italy are open, that the power of Vitellius is overthrown. Yours will be the delight of following the victor and of treading in his footsteps." His words rang among the assembly in a way that moved even men of caution and foresight, while the generals, and after them the rest, exalted him as their one leader. The decision was made, and just like a century earlier, when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, the die was cast. The provinces from Noricum to Moesia secured their borders and signed treaties with tribal neighbors to protect themselves from possible raids. After all preparations were complete, Marcus Antonius Primus led a coalition across the Julian Alps, as the Romans knew them then, into Italy, where they occupied important towns, some even opening their gates for them. The armies supporting Vespasian defeated Vitellius's forces, first at Bedriacum and then at Cremona. They continued their march on Rome, where unrest was brewing and escalating into fights between the supporters of Vespasian and supporters of Vitellius. After heavy fights, the army of Vespasian took the city and killed Vitellius. The next day, the Senate proclaimed Vespasian as the true emperor, thus ending the civil war. This civil war is in many ways comparable to those from the late Republic that included Julius Caesar, Pompey, Mark Antony, and Augustus. It was marked by crimes against civilians, robbery, enslavement, and rape, corruption among the highest levels of government, ransacking of cities, and a general lack of law. The crisis showed that the restoration of the Republic wasn't feasible and that the Senate was losing its power, while the army increased its own. The Year of 4 Emperors demonstrated what was theorized already some years before, that the Emperor of Rome didn't have to come from Italy, let alone Rome. Additionally, among the contenders for the throne, Vespasian came from the most modest background and, according to Tacitus, he would be the only emperor to be changed for the better by his new position. Vespasian, the 10th of the Caesars, could be said to have been the first emperor to be chosen on his merit alone. Yes, the great Julius indeed seized the supreme power by sheer force of commanding ability and resolute will, but the 5 princes that followed owed their position in the first place to their connection either by blood or marriage alliance to his house. Augustus was not an unworthy successor. Possibly the same could be said for Tiberius, who fell out of grace later in life. As for Caligula, Claudius, and Nero, no one would have dreamt of committing the imperial power to them had it not been for the hereditary principle. Galba owed his elevation in no small degree to a distinguished descent, which made him one of the first personages of the empire outside of the imperial house. Otho and Vitellius to the caprice and discontent of the army. But Vespasian had no claims but what he had created for himself. He proved his skills as a commander in Britannia and Judea as he did in administration and governance. And once he came to power, he used both as well. If it was said that Emperor Augustus found Rome made of brick and left it of marble, then it could be said that Vespasian found Rome without a penny, especially after Nero's extravagant reign and the following civil war, and left it with a full treasury. If nothing else, let us mention that the construction of the great Colosseum began under his rule, though he would not live to see it finished. That would fall on his son and successor, Titus. Like with the Colosseum, Vespasian was very generous to towns throughout the empire that suffered from earthquakes and other disasters, as he was generous to arts and education, though he had an active dislike of philosophers. Vespasian was far from a virtuous emperor though, and he pushed pragmatism to the level that left many people past and present critiquing his rule. To restore Rome's treasury, he had to turn to questionable methods, like selling titles and positions to corrupt and unscrupulous individuals. His greed for money, probably exceeding beyond what was necessary, was considered both his greatest flaw and greatest strength even in ancient times. His other fault, though not exclusive to him, was a harsh persecution of the Jews and the destructions and casualties he caused while suppressing the Jewish revolt. Jerusalem in particular suffered greatly. And as one might expect of him, he also imposed a religious tax on them. Like most other emperors, he also had no reservation towards the use of propaganda to legitimize and entrench himself on the throne. On the whole, we get the idea of a vigorous man with petty weaknesses, possessed with a strong sense of public duty, but without an elevated character. His avarice, ambition and greed, while self-serving, were used with his administrative skills to empower the empire. He had a gift of a rough and somewhat boisterous humor. Such was his jest to Titus when he remonstrated with his father on his making a gain from a somewhat unsavory source. He handed Titus a coin and asked him, "Has it a bad smell?" "No," said Titus. "Yet it comes from there." More accurately, this refers to the so-called urine tax he introduced, and the proverb "money doesn't stink" supposedly comes from here. Vespasian died at the age of 69 after about 10 years in power, in 79 AD. When his last illness came on, he remarked with a grim allusion to the Roman practice of deifying deceased emperors, "Dear me, I fancy that I am becoming a god." And our friend Marcus Antonius Primus, the one who brought Moesian and Pannonian legions to Vespasian and secured the throne for him, well, he fell into disfavor, not with Vespasian, but with military commanders and advisors surrounding him, especially those that already served under him in the east before the civil war. As he didn't receive a deserving promotion or recognition, Primus returned to his hometown of Toulouse, where he became patron of arts and deservingly rested on his laurels until a peaceful end. Another famous patron of the arts was Maecenas, right hand to the first emperor Augustus. To learn about his impact on Rome and extravagant lifestyle, click on the next video or the link in the description. Be sure to like, subscribe, you know how YouTube works, and I will bring you more history soon.